The Supreme Court has struck down Roe v. Wade by a 6-3 ruling. Donald Trump promised that he would appoint justices to the Supreme Court that would strike down Roe. Those justices have now fulfilled that promise. Emily, what's your reaction to this ruling, and how closely do you think that it mirrors what was leaked previously?
It's odd to have such a momentous and such a landmark decision be so predictable because we had that leak. It's sort of strange that this decision, as we have been able to go through it just a little bit because it just came out moments ago, and we're breaking it down here within moments really of it coming out. It's strange that we basically knew exactly what this was going to look like. I'm sure there are tweaks in the final ruling. But in spirit, it seems, at least so far, to be very similar to Alito's leaked majority opinion that we've known about for weeks now. We've covered here extensively for a while. And Ryan, I don't know about you, there have been major Supreme Court decisions that come out every single year, and it's always a rush to sort of go through the document itself, and the country can be sort of struck by a judicial lightning bolt in a moment's notice. In this case, that happened, but we've known pretty much what it would look like for a while. It's odd.
Right. I think May 2nd was when Politico reported on its leaked draft of the opinion, and going through it so far, it looks like it's fairly consistent with that opinion so far. It is written by Alito. So this is the result of 40 years of right-wing organizing, and I think for many of those 40 years, a lot of the people involved with this movement were not serious. Did not think that
Yes.
This alliance that the kind of Republican establishment had struck with the kind of evangelical conservative movement was actually going to go ahead and catch the car, was actually going to overturn Roe v. Wade. Democrats, in fact, privately, for my entire lifetime up until very recently, were saying Republicans are never going to actually overturn Roe v. Wade. They would never do that. They're not that crazy. Well, no, they did, and they did it. So how did how did Democrats miss this, and how did the Republican establishment kind of lose control of the monster that they created in this lab?
Well, that's a really interesting point. As somebody who would probably be considered part of that monster, I think there are a lot of people over at the
You were
RNC.
in that lab. You were, or not you, because you were too young at the time. But the movement that you're a part of was kind of dragged into the Republican coalition with the promise that we're going to reassert the patriarchy. And this is kind of our kind of proxy fight that we're going to wage over it. And did you believe it, even when you were younger?
No, absolutely not. It's unthinkable. And this is in the Associated Press's copy of their article announcing that Roe was overturned. They say, and this is odd for an Associated Press report, for copy from essentially a Wire report, but they said this was previously basically unthinkable. And I think that's actually right. And what your point is really interesting about the lab monster, because I think there are a whole lot of people, and I said this as soon as that Dobbs argument was made and the justices seemed pretty receptive to it back in the fall, I guarantee you there are a whole lot of people at the RNC right now shaking in their boots. They did not want this to happen. The Republican establishment is not going to be happy about this at all, because we do know that polls find majority of people, even though they aren't super able to define Roe very well and the consequences of it, are not supportive of it being overturned. That said, I think it's also very important to say that thanks to decades of left-wing activism, because of decades of left-wing activism, whether you're thankful for it or not, abortion remains legal and will remain legal in about half of the country. In many, many states, the right will still be there. This decision to overturn Roe is one that, at least legally, a lot of scholars would have believed with, because Roe itself was rooted in this sort of tenuous right to privacy in the 14th Amendment, that it wasn't the argument for abortion being legalized through that right to privacy Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Lawrence Tribe, these people for years have said Roe was always, liberal legal scholars have said Roe was always in danger because the opinion itself was never that sound and was never really rested on sound foundation.
So let's talk about the implications, and then we can come back and maybe do some more on this. But so as of right now, are there not trigger laws in states across the country that have now banned abortion? In other words, there were a lot of red states that passed laws that were waiting for Roe to fall, and the moment that Roe falls, the new laws and so if you're a 13-year-old who's pregnant right now, who has an appointment Monday for an abortion, what in a red state, what are the implications? Or in a state where there are these trigger laws, is that now illegal?
Yeah, I think that's right. And there are states that had trigger laws, for instance, like New York, where Roe has been codified. And so that's on the books now that Roe has fallen. The right is there in the state law. But you're right. In red states that have trigger laws, I forget how many the number is. Those are states that tend to have already really stringent restrictions on abortion access, and so and there aren't a lot of clinics, I'm assuming, operating in the vast majority of those states. But yes, absolutely, people will immediately, I suspect, have to cross state lines or have the sort of abortion by mail process until laws start to target that, which is something that's definitely incoming in just future months as well.
And this is a developing story. Stick around. We're going to have more on this very soon.